I think this is why like I mentioned life path mentorship, personal life path mentorship earlier in the episode. That's basically what we do in that program. We look at all the 8 cognitive functions and we create a systems map for somebody's life and your relationship to all these areas. Because I think when you break something apart like that in a system, you actually know what's going on. You can influence it. Just imagine breaking a car engine apart when a car's not working. You can find the part that doesn't work. You fix it, put the engine back together. Now it works. It's kind of the same thing as we're doing in our personalities. And so the systems approach to the person and then the person you're in a relationship with, they have their own system running. And then the relationship is like an overlay of both of those systems and it creates its own systems, right? Its own emergence and system that's running.
Yeah.
And so what I hear you saying is how those are set up, like how the agreements, whether spoken or unspoken, the habits, the conditions, the environment, all those things are going to influence the results you get in your relationship. So that's a lot to unpack. We can't do all of that on this episode. So we're going to zoom in on some parts of that system today and talk about how, well, I think what we want to do here is we want to introduce some of the archetypical energy that your cognitive functions and your personality are associated with. Now, again, in our personality life path mentorship, we go really deep into this, right? We spend weeks at this. We can't do that today. We're going to give you a cursory overview of some of the energies you're carrying, whether you know it or not, unconsciously in your personality. And those energies are flavored. We all have them. Like we all have a heroic part of ourselves, for example, but it's flavored by our personality type, how that heroism shows up in the world. And so there's like an alchemical merging of like an energy that we carry in a general way. And then the quality of that energy gets flavored by how we're wired individually. And again, we spent an entire program on that, but let's do our best today to give somebody something they can take away if they're listening or watching about this, that they could maybe apply to their relationship right away this week.
Well, and speaking to those energies, I think that the 2 elements we bring into relationships in terms of the system of our personality are our assumptions and our expectations.
Yeah.
And in fact, in our series, our what we call our self-love series, where we're talking about our relationship to ourselves, the key underlying principle we kept returning to was, what are our expectations for ourselves? Like what do we expect out of ourselves that maybe we can't reach or probably shouldn't expect ourselves to reach, and so we experience disappointment? What expectations are too low, right? And so we're not meeting a higher expectation for ourselves, which would create self-confidence. So expectations are pretty powerful, right?
Yes.
And when we bring expectations into our relationship with ourselves, we see how it really impacts how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
The same thing is going to apply to a relationship with another person. The expectations we're bringing in are pretty big.
Yeah, I want to go a little deeper into that just for a moment. It's going to sideline the conversation just for a second, topically.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll come back to the main framework here. But I just want to highlight that to say, 30 to 50 years ago, when a couple got together, at least here in the United States and the West, there were societal expectations for that couple that were very clear to everybody, both parties of that couple, society at large, the church they attended or community they were involved with, or the families they came from. Everybody had the same picture and image in their mind of what those expectations looked like, right? That's where we get the 1950s housewife staying at home with the kids cleaning and the man with the briefcase with the nice business suit on the train going to New York City to work the day job, right? There's like this archetype that you see. And there's challenges to this, right? It limited people to live the lives that they wanted to live. So that was the challenge in that framework, is that all these expectations that were agreed to in society and culture prevented people from their individuality and sovereignty when they wanted to often. Like a woman.
Too cookie cutter.
Yes. A woman in 1955 didn't have a lot of options, as many options as she has today. And so I think that humanity has progressed and we've given people more freedom and options, and we don't have writ large top-down expectations put on people in how they couple up, what they have to do, kids, all of this stuff. The challenge with this now, though, is when you don't have any expectations, you have to, as a couple, create your own every single time you partnership. Like every time you partner or come together, society, it doesn't have anything preloaded. But a lot of people are operating assuming there's a preloaded expectation or assumption of what a relationship would. But are we certain we're all seeing those the same? Because there's a bunch of different ones now in culture and society. So when a couple gets together, they basically have to create a compact, an agreement to say, here are my assumptions, here are my expectations. And no one does that
Yeah.
unless they go to like marriage counseling or something, which very rare, like happens much anymore outside of like religious frameworks or those kinds of things. So we've got people getting together, coupling up, partnering up. They don't have clear expectations of each other. They have assumed expectations and assumptions. And now they're upset and frustrated that we're not meeting each other's expectations, but they were never talked about. We just assumed them all.
Yeah.
And that worked 50 years ago to assume them because
Yeah.
everybody was in on the same framework,
Yeah.
right? When I say it worked, I'm saying it functioned. A lot of people were unhappy, but society kind of carried along, and at least you knew what the quote unquote rules were in a relation dynamic.
Yeah. Well,
Even if you didn't like those rules, at least they were clear and everybody could kind of like have a guide, like a guardrail for it.
well, what's the phrase? You never solve problems, you just trade them.
Yes.
So there were clear problems in this idea that everybody's relationship had to look the same.
Yeah.
But once those expectations were removed in order to account for individuality and individual preferences, now we've traded the problem of now, like you mentioned, people's expectations are very individualized, and who knows where they were born.
Yeah.
And then they bring them in without making it clear.
So one could say we're screwed. Like relationships are screwed. We're in big trouble.
Right.
No one's ever going to be able to have a satisfying relationship except you and I know, Antonia, there's this thing called type, personality type, that does give us at least a ballast of relationship for ourselves in a sovereign way, right? We understand ourselves. We can understand the relationship with ourselves. And we have some frameworks now and tools with personality types and the archetypes and all of these things. Oh, wait. So now if I am required, or not required, but if I have the opportunity to talk with a partner and create those expectations assumptions, we have a ballast and we have a tool to do it with personality type.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to sideline to say all of that. I think that's the reason why we're talking about this today is because it's needed now more than ever in the grand scheme of relationships writ large.
Yeah. Well, that actually, what you just mentioned, when I said assumptions and expectations, I think you were talking about something a little different, but I think they're just layers of them.
Okay.
Like the expectations you're talking about are the expectation for what a relationship is going to be just in general.
Yeah.
And I do think that we still look to the outside world to frame our expectations. We just don't have as much of a control.
A lot of options out there.
Yeah. Well, and we're no longer in a modernist time period where things are very, in a modernist time period, there's like one answer to the question.
3 TV channels, one answer.
That's right.
It.
One news channel, one set of encyclopedias. We're now in a very postmodern time period where there's literally endless amounts of options in every possible, in every possible topic. There's an endless variety of ways you can go about it.
Yeah.
And so there's benefit that comes with that, but there's also added challenge that goes with that. So the benefit is that you can model your relationship as you choose. And, you can see this. There's a rise right now of more traditional relationships. And I don't think that that's just in religious circles. I think that that's just like people are kind of tired of having to invent everything from scratch.
They want a template.
Yeah. So they're kind of going back to some templates, and there is advantages to that because I think it was a template to begin with for a reason. I think templates are usually created when they suit the largest percentage of people.
You and I have templates.
That's right.
I mean, you mentioned our tertiary or 10-year-old earlier. You have extroverted feeling or harmony. I have extroverted thinking or effectiveness. I tend to be the one that takes the trash out and does like the household stuff, like the fixer-up stuff.
Well, you pay the bills and I do the cooking. Yeah. It's very traditional.
We just kind of traditionally follow it. And I kind of happy with that.
I'm
like,
down.
At least on my part, you may be unhappy doing the cooking. I like your cooking better than my cooking. So
I like my cooking better than yours. I hate paying bills. I'm super happy to not have to take trash out. Like, it's all fine.
Yeah.
Now, we're not entirely traditional. I mean,
you did fix the garbage disposal using ChatGPT or Perplexity or something.
Perplexity, that's right. I'm the one who usually does
I'm so proud of you.
The DIY projects, right? I'm the one who's usually fixing stuff with
TI tinkerer.
Yeah, with tools. But that's okay. I mean, there's nothing to say that you can't, go outside of whatever the script is, even if you prefer a script. I wouldn't say we're exactly traditional, but I would say that we definitely have found our niche.
Yeah.
And we did bring in pretty traditional expectations from our upbringing, but with a twist, I think. I think we definitely have it with a twist. And that's what's nice about not being forced into more traditional roles is that there's more modification without the fear of judgment that other people are. I mean, the judgment from the outside world into your relationship only matters if they're going to meddle.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't care what people think about our relationship but in those time periods, how society thought about you also determined what level of meddling they were going to do.
Well, in some ways you wanted meddling because like when the going got tough, your families were all there at the wedding and they were all supportive of this union between two people.
That's true.
You kind of want them to go, no, stick with this.
Meddling came with support.
Like work through it. Like don't just give up. Like, I mean, obviously with health and like, you're not getting hurt or abused or something really bad's happening. I'm just talking about getting along, in a general way. Your family would often like support that and they'd want to see it. You made a commitment. You're kind of held accountable by all these people you committed formally in public to.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't have that as much. People aren't doing formal accountability marriage ceremonies as much anymore. They're coupling up, but there's no like moment where they say, no, we're going to publicly declare that we're committing to each other around something.
Yeah.
I think there's a power in that. And it again, you don't have to do it, but it certainly does create now that support and that accountability for your relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Again, you don't solve problems, you just trade them. So if you don't have that kind of system set up,
not everybody does.
I don't have a lot of meddling from anybody in my life, but I also don't have a lot of support.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They don't bother you either way.
Don't bother me either way. So yeah, there is that. So there's the top level expectations that we bring into a relationship that are oftentimes not talked about anymore.
Yeah.
Probably because we assume other people have the same expectations in their head, even if we're not in a modernist time period. Like what most of us have been crafted and fashioned at this point, not by societal templates and structures, which have their purpose. I mean, I think I know that in the past, I talked a lot of crap about templates. You don't want to live a templatized life. You want to live outside of that. And now I'm maybe it's because I'm integrating my introverted sensing or memory function a lot more, but I see the value in templates. I don't think everybody should have to live according to a template. And I don't think it suits everyone. And I think people should be given permission to live outside of them. I don't think we should have like the strangling cultural expectation that everybody will live just so. But there's a value to having a template. And one of them is we are less influenced by creative media.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of expectations are now set based on
what's possible.
Yeah. And a bit of fantasy.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're given love stories and we're given happily ever afters. And even in this more postmodern time period where we don't have as traditional happily ever after stories, we still have a lot of, there's an insinuation that things are easier than they actually are going to be, which we talked a little bit about in the last episode too. So there's something to be said for having direct conversations around what your expectations for relationships are just in general.
Yeah. So we went from, the metaphor could be templates. We had these like, a PDF you can't edit, at least not easily.
Right.
And so we used to have PDF versions of like relationships. You couldn't edit it. You couldn't change it. It was like that. You handed it like, do the relationship this way. This is the only option. Like maybe 2 options. That's it. And then we went from there, and what I hear you say, it's like we're now blank page syndrome. It's like we're just like, hey, there's a blank page, make the relationship anything you want. Well, what about an editable Word or Google Doc, right? That we all share as a couple relationship. It has a template, but you can edit it and make it your own. But you start from some framework or some basis of something.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you're positing.
Well, but nobody's going to give it to you, at least at this time period in history.
Hunt for it.
In this culture.
Yeah.
In this culture, you may or may not be given one of those. And so you're going to have to make it yourself. Yeah. This is a bit of a tangent from the direction I was originally going to go. Let me know when you feel complete on it.
Let's go back to that here,
Okay.
and let's get back into some of the stuff we wanted to talk about.
Well, but I think it sets up a good frame for what we're talking about when we say you should have communication around expectations. What we just mentioned, I think most people would say, yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's reasonable to talk about what I'm expecting out of a relationship and to figure out whether or not you want to live up to your partner's expectations, because they might not be reasonable, at least for you. Like you might say, yeah, that's not a thing I can do. And so that needs to be known as soon as possible.